Hi, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more people who appear to be in the process of joining to join in, and then we'll get kicked off. Can everyone hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Beautiful. Okay, I think we have everyone. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Condominium Contractors and COVID-19, essential information on essential services. This webinar is proudly brought to you by the CCI Golden Horseshoe Chapter. And tonight our expert panel of members from the CCI Golden Horseshoe Professional and Business Partners Committee will update you on how they've been providing services to our condominium corporations during the COVID-19 restrictions that we've all been dealing with. We have a really great panel from across various different fields, and I think you'll get a lot of helpful information that hopefully can help you and your communities. I'll be your host, your moderator this evening. My name is Patrick Greco. I'm a partner in the Condominium Law Group at Shibley Wrighton LLP and a member of the Professional and Business Partners Committee. How our program will work is each of our 6 speakers will present to you for approximately 7 minutes, some a little longer, some a little shorter. Once all the speakers have presented, we will take some questions. All microphones are being muted so that everyone can hear our speakers as best as possible. If for some reason your mic does not mute itself, please proceed to do that now. If you have any questions, and we're going to welcome questions, type them into the chat function, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and I'll try to go through and capture as many questions. And if you want to direct a question to a specific panelist, by all means, let us know. I think that's it. Yep, time permitting at the end, we'll take as many questions as we can. So welcome, everyone. I think everyone can hear me. I will let newcomers in as they arrive. But the first person in our list of illustrious speakers tonight is Kevin Shaw. Kevin is a principal and manager of building science with Sion Coulter Engineers and Building Scientists. Kevin is responsible for all operational aspects of Sion Coulter's building science services. Kevin has over 20 years of experience in building evaluation and rehabilitation. Kevin sits on the board of directors for CCI Golden Horseshoe Chapter. He's an active member of the Business Partners Committee as well and acts as the liaison to the board of directors. If you'll give me 1 second, I'm going to enable Kevin's audio and turn it over to him. All right, Kevin, I think you're good to go.
All right, that's perfect. Thanks, Patrick. So hi, everyone. Good evening. I just been asked to talk briefly about the state of engineering services and related to condominium and the state of those services as we're dealing with our current pandemic conditions. In general, firms like ours are doing our best. We are still open and operating and providing services and are available for our condominium clients. We do have our offices closed right now, and our staff are all working from home. But as normal, they are available on their cell phones, emails, of course, and these days with a lot of services just like this and doing a lot of video conferencing. So we're still having meetings with our clients, meetings with boards, etc. So video conferencing has certainly helped out a lot with that. In terms of conditions for ourselves out there and our staff, we have all of our staff equipped with personal protective equipment during this time. So if you're going to have any interactions with them, they're equipped with masks, with gloves, and hand sanitizer, and are making sure we're using them to keep everybody safe, along with all the usual stuff that we would normally have: our safety vests, hard hats, work boots, etc. So in terms of services, we're still providing them. The normal ones are there. We're still doing investigation work and inspection work for condos. So that's reviewing, cladding issues and water leakage problems and parking garage structure issues, site component issues, that kind of thing. But we're trying to limit those inspections as much as possible to exterior areas, so on the roof or outside the building or in areas that are not busy, such as parking garages, etc. So we're doing that as much as possible. we're trying to limit or even not do in-suite inspections. So that's sort of going both ways. Both our clients are rather reluctant to allow our staff in, and our staff themselves are not anxious to go into units, but we have done the odd one for critical issues such as water leakage problems and that sort of thing. So as we work on our sites, we're obviously trying to limit personal interactions as much as possible and maintain proper social distancing. One thing we are finding is we're getting a little lucky in certain areas, and that so many condos have their facilities shut down, such as amenity areas and that kind of thing, that some of our clients are taking advantage of that and getting us into those areas while they're unoccupied, so we can do investigations and potentially take care of repair problems. Further to that, then, we are still working on specifications and drawings and tendering projects for repair work. So contractors are still accepting bids, and we're putting those packages together, getting those prices in for our clients. So you can be prepared essentially with all that information. You're ready to go when hopefully the government will be lifting those restrictions and getting people back to work and allowing more construction. In regard to construction itself, obviously, government has mandated to suspend overall construction unless under a few specific categories, and Justin's going to be talking a bit more about that later tonight. But in general, it's for projects that you've started before April 4th, or for projects that are really necessary. So they're talking about, you know, needed maintenance work. So if you have a leakage problem in your roof, we're considering that to be necessary and something that can be taken care of even during this time. But in regard to that, we're definitely working with our condos and our clients, and we're doing our best to make sure the parties are all in agreement over what the work is going to entail, the nature of that work, how many workmen will be on site, what protective measures will be taken, so that we can make sure if we are undertaking a construction project that it's being done as safely as possible. One of the other big services we offer is reserve fund planning, and reserve fund studies, etc., are continuing during these times. So we're doing lots of studies, Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Again, in regard to maintaining safe conditions, we're making sure that our Class 2 inspections that require us to be on site are restricted to common areas of the building only as much as possible, and again, limiting our interaction with anybody at the site. In terms of reserve planning, we're certainly getting a few questions from clients these days regarding the amount of funding and their potential shortfalls for this year, with so many additional expenditures happening in the buildings with additional cleaning requirements and that kind of thing, that some boards are looking at saying, well, we might have an issue with our full funding to the reserve in the current year. So we are working with them in that regard. There's a couple different options you have that way to change your current plan, and we offer that service to assist in that regard. So clearly you can change your current plan during your year, but you're going to have to redo Form 15 summary to let your owners know that you are making those changes, and indicating what those changes are going to be and how they differ from the existing plan that was in place from your previous study. The other option that's available is to update your study right now. If you feel that there's going to be a shortage in your operating budget for the current year, no reason why you can't get a study done earlier. Do it now, run the new numbers with an adjustment maybe for the current year, and the results of that as you go forward, and prepare a new plan based on that. The other big service we offer is regard to Tarian warranties, performance audits, and the follow-up that happens that way. In regard to Tarian and performance audits, Tarian issued a notice in March, was retroactive to March 16th of this year, indicating that warranty submission claim deadlines have been currently suspended. And they have that set for a period of 90 days, pending review based on what the government's going to be doing. So in this regard, you still have the ability to go through with your performance audits, go through with your follow-ups, etc. But in terms of deadlines, you don't have to worry about it at this juncture. Tarian's going to, once they restart the program again, issue a whole new set of dates for everybody to make sure that they get back on schedule. But in that regard, at least you have some flexibility that way. So in that regard, we're continuing to do our audit inspections and submit to Tarian. But at this juncture, you have the ability to at least not worry about the deadlines themselves. So that's a basic outline of the services typically we provide for condominiums and how they relate to our current times. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Next up, let me see here. Next up is Suzanne Pestano with Gelderman Landscape Services. She is their client care manager in Waterdown. Suzanne has been with Gelderman Landscape Services since 2019 and has over 15 years of account and relationship management experience. She works closely with property managers and condo boards to help solve any service concerns they may have. Suzanne, let me turn your audio on. There you go.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Well, isn't this challenging time right about now with everything that's going on? One of the things from the beginning at Gelderman, we took it upon ourselves as a company to implement several changes to ensure four things. One, that we were essential. Two, that we were abiding by all the rules with all levels of government. That our staff and crews were happy to continue working safely. And to ensure that our clients were accepting of us being on site. Looking at the bigger picture, all I can tell you is what we did as a company and what we felt we needed to do to ensure all of those things were met. On a regular basis, the big thing for us was keeping the communication open with our board members and our property managers, because at this time, there was a number of concerns and questions that would come up due to COVID. So keeping that communication open, reaching out to all of our clients and property managers and letting them know what sort of precautions we were taking and what we're implementing in order for us to work safely and to keep them safe as well as our staff safe. Prior to heading to any of our sites, because the changes were happening so frequently on a day-to-day basis, you never knew what was going to be happening. I would give anywhere from 24 to 48 hours notice to a site, to a property manager and condo board as to when we're planning on being on site. And I would always share the different protocols that we had in place with our staff in order to work safely. Oops, sorry, just moving my notes up here. The big thing for us was our crews, because of the physical distancing, we really had to ensure that our crews were not, normally we would send out 4 members in one vehicle with our trailer. That's not something that we could do moving forward. So we instigated the crew leader would take the truck and trailer. They had hand sanitizer and PPE with them at all times. All equipment had to be sanitized, and the other crew members drove their own personal vehicles to site, which we compensated them for in order to maintain that physical distancing moving from site to site. Each member of the crew was assigned their own tools. They were responsible for sanitizing prior to leaving and in between sites. They had to maintain physical distancing always while on site. And we found that having our crews working in smaller groups closer together, so we could provide bathroom facilities for them, because that was going to be another challenge for any of our crews that were normally having access to a Tim Hortons or a gas station bathroom. Those were things that they wouldn't have access to. So we actually had a porta potty that we would take to site that was sanitized daily, and they had the ability either to, if they were close enough, to come back to the Waterdown office, or they had the porta potty available there. We also had a manager on site with the crews to make sure that all protocols were met and that they were maintaining the physical distancing and everything that was required to work safely. Another thing that we found was a benefit, because a number of our staff, all of the office staff, was working remotely, and our crews were working off on sites. We didn't have that communication that we normally would on a daily basis. So we implemented a Zoom meeting that we did every evening, early evening, 5:30, where everybody that was able to join the meeting, and we could share the challenges that they had, either that they were on site or any questions that came up. And we sort of made it a fun thing. Like, we had different days. We had like one day Wednesday where you had to just have one inspirational word or how you felt for that particular day. We had Taco Tuesday, we called it, where people were discussing what they'd have for dinner. And just different things to be able to maintain that team atmosphere and that camaraderie, so you didn't feel like you were sort of out on your own on a regular basis. The one thing that we're taking away from this is that we will be implementing going forward, having regular Zoom meetings with everybody, both office as well as crews, doing that at least once a week, just to maintain that team atmosphere. So that was the biggest thing for us. It's been a challenge, but everybody's been pretty good. We're happy to continue working, and everything's been going well. So kudos. That's it.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Suzanne. Next up, we have Justin DeBoer. Justin is the president of Skyline Contracting. They are general contractors and roofing and exterior experts, providing these solutions to condominium corporations across the entire Golden Horseshoe region. Justin, I will unmute you, and I think you are live.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm going to jump right in. For condominiums and for contractors, what is important for us to know today so that we can get through this together? I'm going to suggest 3 things. 1, clarity on what's essential. 2, having your people knowing and understand how we stay safe. And number 3, ways to make it all work. Point 1, what's really essential? When it comes to contractor work, there are 2 points on the Ontario list of essential services that I find relevant for condos, especially point 20. I'll read that one. Maintenance, repair, and property management services strictly necessary to manage and maintain the safety, security, sanitation, and essential operation of institutional, commercial, industrial, and residential properties and buildings. Point 31 is about construction. That has to do with temporarily closing of construction sites that are paused or are not active to ensure public safety. When I first read these, my first question was, what does that really mean? After consulting business groups, lobby groups, government, and friends, I can safely conclude there's a lot of gray area. And so today is a great opportunity to get together to discuss this. We know there is maintenance work that is necessary to carry out. Our good clients still need essential things repaired. And so let's work together and do what's reasonable. There's a saying I remember from my Dutch parents that goes something like this: Van jullie doen normaal, doe je gek genoeg. And that basically means when you do normal, you do crazy enough, or be reasonable. I look at this as a refreshing way to review the instructions we've been given and move towards the best we can in light of that. We want to lead the way in creating clarity when many are confused and afraid. For our part at Skyline, necessary and essential things means dealing with anything that's dangerous, which is things like loose flashing, broken railings, heaved sidewalks, anything that compromises security, so it could be fencing, anything that is essential to the operation of the facility, which could be roofs blown off or leaking. So just referring back to the maintenance list again, it reads, manage and maintain the safety, security, and essential operation of properties and buildings. So those are the three we're really focusing on to find out what we can and can't do. What we don't do things right now are things like cosmetic upgrades. So that leads me to the second point, point 2, what do we do to keep our staff and owners safe? So if we do go out and attend to essential service, what do we do to keep our staff safe? The place we started was all those basic rules at the beginning. No handshakes, stay home if you're sick. Our first policy included the Saskatchewan COVID screening test because Ontario didn't have one yet. Each member of our team has been taking that screening test every day before the start of their shift. As we went along, we collected more helpful practices and stocked up on the things that we needed. I have a keepsake here of a local distillery providing hand sanitizer when there was none. As a memento, I say this to remind us that we're down the path a fair ways by now. And our team has been on top of it from the beginning. We want people to feel safe. So again, we are down the path a ways, and good contractors have been on top of this from the beginning. And we do want people to feel safe. We know that's important in a group or in a group setting or in a condominium setting where you have all kinds of different characters. So to date, we have 12 pieces of notices, policies, and videos and things like that that we've done since the beginning, just to roll with the new reality. My last point is ways to make it all work, and this is just some keys. Of course, none of the things that I've talked about really matter if we're not doing them. So people will still not feel safe unless you've explained what you're doing, and even then there still may be fear and trepidation, and we need a plan even for those situations. So the biggest key is recognizing that many people are afraid in the first place. I've seen a study about the buying motives of consumers in the new normal. At the top of the list is people want to know that you're caring for their safety as well as your people, family, and community, as opposed to things like features and benefits, which used to be at the top. And so I say that to say it really does matter how it is you're doing what you're doing as a contractor. Matters for our clients, so it matters for us. Once that's been recognized and your people, like as a contractor, our staff are confident with the new processes, it's time to communicate, and that is the next big key in making it all work. And here's just a few examples of what we've done. Number one, site signs. We had signs made up declaring that an essential service was underway. That means less guesswork and phone calls to the managers, and it lets people know that you know what you're doing and helps them feel safe. Another one we've done is videos, information updates to the clients about how we're being safe and what processes we're following. We've done a few videos walking through this for our property managers and boards, so if they like, they can share the video with the people that are concerned. So video is fast and shareable, and it's a way to get the right information into the hands of those who need it. The clients and boards and managers are served well if they know the folks that are on their sites have done everything they can to minimize the noise for them by caring for the residents and staff. Another example is calling ahead. After all this, some still remain uncomfortable. We had a case where it was best for the repair to be done inside the unit, but the occupant was elderly and concerned. We found that out because we first declare our screening to the occupant, usually on a phone call. And we have a few questions for them as well. We need to know the person that we are helping is also healthy. We did have a concern in these cases. So necessity becomes the mother of invention, and we find a way to do it, let's say from the outside, or in a way that we don't have to come into contact with anyone. So in summary, look for a contractor who clarifies what's really essential, who makes ways to keep people safe and recognizes that people are on the edge and communicate why they can feel safe. And those, I think, are the keys to making through this together as we maintain our buildings and operate on the day-to-day.
Great, thanks, Justin. Moving right along, next up is Toby Park. Toby is the owner of Park Group of Companies, a mechanical, I lost my point here, a mechanical contracting company specializing in professional HVAC, plumbing, hydronic, and pump services. Recently, he's taken on the role as regional plumbing and electrical operation manager for Reliance Home Comfort as well, servicing the Grand River territory. For CCI Golden Horseshoe, he volunteers for the membership committee and offers industry and trade advice for condo owners and associations. Toby, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Patrick. So how does COVID affect the trades and myself as a contractor? To start off, the mechanical trades, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. The Ontario government has deemed us essential services, which means we really haven't stopped working throughout this pandemic isolation time. We're handling all emergency calls and continuing doing installations and preventative maintenance. The biggest changes that I have found have been in the health and safety, customer relations, and really our personnel protocols and procedures. Most, if not all, the contractors I've talked to have implemented some sort of safety program. We have done and are doing ongoing weekly safety training and seminars. We have a staff at Reliance that actually is ahead of this and constantly on top of, like what Suzanne said, ever-changing situations. If anything, we're seeing the protocols are getting tighter as time goes by. All our team members and technicians are signed off on like ever increasing or restrictive policies. We've closed our warehouses and our offices to non-specific staff just to prevent grouping. All of our technicians and staff are issued extensive PPE as well, which are gloves, masks, boot coverings, hand sanitizer, and disinfectant wipes. We encourage them to follow strict handling and working procedures. We furthermore have quarantined all of our products and equipment used. We debox everything so that there's no contamination on harder surfaces, especially when it's transferring between warehouse and the vehicles and the company vehicles. Health Canada has given us some guidelines on the lifespan of the coronavirus on surfaces, and that's where 72 hours on harder surfaces, 48 hours on cardboard, 24 hours on plastics, 4 hours on copper piping. So our staff really, they isolate it from everything else in our warehouse, and we have enough stock that we can keep up with daily needs. On procedure, our technicians call homeowners ahead and ask COVID-related questions. Have they traveled in the past 2 days? Are they showing any signs or symptoms? And they also assure the homeowner themselves whether they have symptoms or they've traveled, and then ask them to keep their distance while working. Initially, there was some pushback, both from customers, and I've had to deal with the union on our staff as well. Jobs were scheduled for later dates with people that were really concerned, but for the most part, people and everyone are very understanding. We take the procedures very seriously. And in our shop, if one person tested positive, we would close the entire branch for a minimum of the 2 weeks and disinfect everything. For Reliance, that's hundreds of people per branch. So it's all our personnel take it very, very, very seriously. Now that the Ontario government has started easing restrictions and coming into our air conditioning season, we're seeing an increase in call volumes. The work is shifting from more than just the emergency calls. When this first started back in March, Reliance Home Comfort, like other contractors, are offering a more flexible payment plans, trying to help people that are out of work. They are deferring payments on rentals past 6 months and offering financing up to 2 years, trying to stretch out things as much as possible for people. I know money and personal financial situations are on most people's minds. Reliance is willing to work with homeowners that might be in tighter situations as well. That's about it. The call volumes are continuing to climb as of late, and really our bigger concerns are starting to shift towards supply chains. And really a lot of it is as the trade with China has slowed. We were prepared ahead of time and are stocked for the summer on most items. And we're anticipating a busy AC season, but our vendors are showing holes in their stock levels. And then other than concerns and challenges for protecting the public and ourselves, the mechanical contracting side has not changed or been affected as much as most industries. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Toby. Before we move on to our final two presenters, let me remind you as viewers, if you have questions, if you don't want to forget them, feel free to jot them into the chat function. You can either chat them to everyone if you don't care, or if you want to just send them to me privately, by all means do that as well. That way we can build up some questions and we won't have a big crush at the end. Better chance of getting your question heard. Our next speaker then is Ryan Griffiths. He's the Director of Condominium Finance with CWB Maxium Financial, a division of Canadian Western Bank. He provides lending services to condominium corporations. Ryan is the chair of the CCI Golden Horseshoe Professional and Business Partners Committee, as well as serving in a number of other roles in both this CCI chapter and others. Ryan, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk a bit about how COVID-19 has impacted the world of lending to condominium corporations or for condominium corporations. And there's kind of two main categories. One is condominium corporations in a process of borrowing or considering borrowing for major repairs. And the second is condominium corporations that are concerned about paying operating costs at this time and sort of what borrowing options are available. So in the first category, if you're a condominium in the midst of borrowing for a major project or you're considering borrowing, the first question clients are asking is, how has this pandemic impacted that? Well, there's been some impact. I'm aware there are some lenders that traditionally would have lent to condominium corporations that have stopped issuing proposals altogether. Different lenders raise funds in different ways. So their access to funding may have been impacted as a result of the pandemic. So, if you were out there looking for financing or you have a proposal with a lender, speak to them to make sure that they're still able to provide that financing, or if you have a renewal coming up, make sure that lender is willing and able to renew that financing. The other big question that I get is, the minute the Bank of Canada dropped their rates and banks dropped their prime rates, immediately clients are saying, well, how does that impact me? How much of a better rate am I getting? In the world of lending, not every rate has gone down. Mortgage rates have actually gone up. But with respect to condominium corporation borrowing, it has gotten better. It has improved. And there's generally two parts to the way an interest rate is calculated. So if you're a corporation in the middle of a construction project, you're typically borrowing money on some type of construction line of credit. And that's usually based on prime. So prime, since this all began, has gone down by 1.5%. So if your rate was 6%, you're probably now paying 4.5%, which is fantastic. Once that construction is completed, most financing is provided on a fixed term basis. That's usually pegged to some benchmark like the Government of Canada bond or some internal cost of funds for that bank. So I know our clients that were in the middle of financing a project and that are now locking that financing in. The rate has certainly improved for them. They're getting a much better fixed rate than they were expecting. So that's also very positive. I would say, you know, if you're bored for a major project and you're looking to lock in that financing, now is a good time to think about it. If you're out there seeking financing or thinking about doing a major project, now is a good time to talk to one or more lenders and see what they're able to offer. We've also seen some examples where, and I'd have to touch base with maybe Kevin and Justin and see their view on this, but we've seen some projects go to tender and the corporations are getting significantly better pricing right now as a result of everything that's going on. So, you know, it may be a good time to think about doing work, and the savings on the project might offset some of that interest cost. Somewhat opportunistic. Okay, so moving on to financing for operating needs. So in the current environment, some condo corporations are considering using a line of credit or a type of operating facility to help pay operating costs. Condos are concerned about two things. One, unit owners going into arrears, and also about operating costs or operating costs above the norm or above what they've budgeted, things like utilities. You know, everyone's now home all the time. They're incurring extra cleaning costs or extra security costs. So, you know, so far, the feedback that we've got is that arrears hasn't been a huge problem. Now that's based on the fees that were paid or unpaid in April, so April 1st. It's still a little too early to get a good sense of whether May 1st is going to be more or less problematic. I would say that data is going to be available in the next week or so. Each corporation is different. They're going to have different circumstances. I think some will be severely impacted and others might not be impacted at all. But before you consider borrowing, I think that the corporation needs to do an assessment of risk and needs to assess, you know, whether a spike in receivables or arrears or whether incurring additional cost is going to be a problem for them. And there's no magic formula to that, but I think you want to take a look at how much operating cash you have relative to the operating expenses. So if you look at your last financial statement and you take the amount of cash that you have in your operating account and you take away from that whatever operating payables you have, that amount is a good indicator of how much arrears you could sustain or how much additional costs you might sustain without getting into trouble, without having to pick and choose what invoices you're going to pay. So I think that's a good indicator, but it's not the only indicator. If you're worried about cash flow, and if you think you have a reason to be worried about it, then an operating line might be a tool that you want to use. I think you would want something that's short-term in nature, something the corporation could draw to provide operating cash to help pay the bills. And ideally, that money gets repaid once you've collected the outstanding condo fees that are receivable, or it gets repaid over a reasonably short period of time through additional collections in subsequent budget years. So you're not burdening your owners at the worst possible time and going back and asking them to pay more. So I'd suggest condos check with their primary bank. Most banks offer lines of credit, but if your banking institution has a program specifically to lend to condominium corporations, that operating line might fit your needs. If they don't, I think you need to be careful, and you need to talk about how the borrowing is calculated. You need to talk about what covenants might apply. Traditional banks offer products for profit-making businesses, and a nonprofit, sometimes the way that the covenants and sometimes the way borrowing is calculated just won't fit. So if your individual bank doesn't offer a program, there are specialized lenders like CWB Maxium that have a product specifically for and actually developed specifically for COVID-19 and to provide some operating cash with some good flexibility to pay it back. Interest rates today for that type of short-term borrowing are also pretty attractive. So we're still in the early days. I think the arrears will be a trailing indicator of the financial impact of COVID. There are some corporations that I've seen consider using a line of credit at this point in time, and they fall into a few different categories. So one is corporations that had arrears issues prior to COVID-19. Another are commercial condo corporations where the businesses have been impacted more immediately. Corporations that were doing a special assessment, some of them are now reassessing that choice in the midst of the economic impacts of this, or they're expecting more difficulty collecting, and they're being proactive in terms of setting up a fallback plan. Condos that were already operating lean and they can't sustain much arrears or overages in operating costs. Another one is condos where you have a single owner who owns multiple units and pays a good share of the fees and a good share of the expenses, or condos where an individual unit makes up a large proportion of the money being collected. I think they're particularly vulnerable because a lot of the source of that income is coming from one individual or one source. So if a corporation is going to borrow, I think you need to consider how that borrowing is authorized. You may have an existing bylaw that you can rely on, or you may need to obtain authorization from a new bylaw, or in some cases by issuing a new budget. In any case, the board is going to have to seek legal counsel. They're going to have to speak with their lawyer, and they're going to have to speak with the lender to understand what those requirements are going to be and what the timing looks like. What I would suggest is that boards do an assessment and put a plan together on a proactive basis rather than a reactive basis. Right? Do your assessment to see how vulnerable you think you are, and if your corporation's at risk of not having enough cash, that you put a plan in place. That plan could be, as Kevin talked about, some type of deferral of reserve fund contributions for a period of time. It could be changing your reserve funding plan to have more operating cash, or it could be using a line of credit to support operating cash. I think those are kind of the three options that are available. So often the case with borrowing is it's best not to wait until you're in dire straits, right? Lenders need time to issue approvals and documents. If you need a new borrowing bylaw, the Act requires at least 35 days from the issuance of a preliminary notice. So, if your fallback plan includes using an operating line, I'd suggest you get approval in place with the lender, you get your borrowing authorization in place before you actually need it. And that may be all you do. You may just set it up and know that it's there if necessary. But I'd suggest you do that on a proactive basis. So my summary there is that, a line of credit is one of the few options available to support cash flow if your corporation thinks you're going to need it. I would do that assessment. Every corporation should do some type of assessment, pick what their fallback plan is going to be on a proactive basis, and be prepared if necessary. So I hope that's helpful insight and guidance, and I'll try to answer anybody's questions on the chat during the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Our last, am I coming through? Yeah. Our last speaker of the evening has probably the broadest perspective of any of our speakers because she works at the corporation level with boards, and that is Gail Cote. Gail is a condominium manager with Property Management Guild, who has over 20 years of professional property management experience. Gail is on the CCI Golden Horseshoe Board of Directors, is a past CCI Golden Horseshoe Membership and Social Media Committee Chairperson, and continues to volunteer on the CCI Golden Horseshoe Professional and Business Partners Committee. Here to give you the manager's perspective, Gail, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me okay? We were having some issues before. Good. Okay, so I'm going to touch base tonight on some of the challenges managers and boards are now faced with. I'm sure that we all know property management and boards have a higher risk of keeping residents safe. This is an excellent opportunity for boards and managers to embrace and use the powers available to them to keep their communities safe. Some of the resources that are available to the boards and managers to help with this process are going to be, first and foremost, the Public Health Department. There is a lot of information available for boards and managers. cleaning and sanitation crews, taking your direction and your cues from them on how they propose to address these issues and making sure that that conforms to what you and the manager and the board would like to see in the building. There's going to be a lot of different contractor perspectives as well that you can get valuable information from. Justin, Kevin, Toby spoke about some of what they're doing as well. And you're going to need professional assistance in navigating through liability for the condo, which would most likely going to be through legal counsel. During this pandemic, many managers and boards are worried about the potential repercussions and their liability of shutting down the amenities or stopping renovations within the unit. Although anything can happen, we think that it's unlikely that any court is going to end up penalizing a board that's acting honestly in good faith to keep everyone safe. It's really important that the owners and the board try to work together through that process. But at the end of the day, if the board is trying to keep them safe, I don't think there's going to be much, if any, repercussions. There's been a lot of owners that are coming back and asking if they will have a reduction in the fees. You know, you've closed an amenity, I can't use the gym or the pool. But they don't understand that a closure of an amenity in one area, yes, you are saving costs, but the operating costs do increase in other areas. So the board and management need to communicate what is being done, why it's being done, and provide explanations as to why there aren't any reductions. That will help alleviate those questions and feedback and pushback from owners. Yes, when amenity closes, it does save money in some areas. In other areas, though, utilities in different areas are increasing. Your hydro and water, people are home more often all day. There's going to be legal and professional support, engineers, as well as lawyers to navigate through the constantly changing situations to figure out what you can and cannot do. Additional cleaning for any of the common elements areas that remain open. That's cleaning now, and also if COVID were to arrive at the condominium. Could be anywhere from the garbage areas, the laundry areas, mailbox areas. And another consideration that owners aren't looking at right now, and boards perhaps should, is the potential for future shortfalls if fees aren't paid. The impacts, as Ryan touched on, aren't being felt right now, but they are going to start being felt. The next coming months, things are not opening up very quickly. People are still unemployed, so you're going to be feeling a lot of the impacts later. As the situation is constantly evolving, communication is going to be absolute key in relaying important information to owners, and it's going to be constant communication. The best and fastest way to communicate to all owners is the electronic communication, which is an instant delivery. It's an email, ping, it's delivered. With very recent government rulings, this can now be easily achieved through the electronic methods, providing you have an email address for the owner. They don't necessarily need to have signed up for a newsletter or a notice blast. However, they do need to have an email address. If they don't have that, you are going to have to keep mailing them copies. But within every mailing that you do send to the owner, make sure you keep an inclusion in that the faster way to receive these updates is going to be electronic. You might be able to get more owners on board and help alleviate a lot of the pushback. Many of the corporations have also developed their own COVID-19 policies. However, I'm alarmed at how many condominiums have not yet. They also think that this may not apply to them because of the type of condominium they are. But a policy is important for all types of condominiums, high-rise and low-rise, but also townhomes, commercial, work-live, those kind of condominiums as well. A lot of condominium boards, owners, and managers think, well, the building's the only one that really has shared amenities and they're impacted. But there's also other considerations to be taken. There's a lot of non-building sites that have shared amenities, which would be things like a centralized garbage area and mailboxes, park areas, benches, gazebos, parking garages. It's important to note some townhomes actually share underground parking areas. So now you've got shared doors, shared stairways and railings, and it could be shared, the doorways that you're walking through a hallway, and that one doorway may go to your unit, but it's accessible to a lot of different owners. So taking those kind of areas into consideration when developing your policy is going to be important. For commercial sites, or those condominiums that have commercial units within theirs, mixed residential or even work-live, they need to be considered as well, because some of those commercial units could be an essential service. They could have curbside pickup. That's starting to unroll as of Friday night and Saturday and into Monday. So now there's going to be curbside pickup. So including the future, the rollouts, the potential openings, and what owners need to do, condominiums going to do to assist, should be included in your policy. With the new release earlier today, like I said, it's not just considering the commercial unit itself, but you also now have to look at how are you going to limit the obstructions to the site. So you might have multi-residential as well as commercial units, but where are these people going to park to do the curbside pickup? Are they going to obstruct any of the other unit owners, their way in and out to the parking areas? You have to ensure the parking area is safe because now there's a matter of liability. You want to assist all owners in being able to continue with their day-to-day requirements as a whole community. So this includes the commercial unit owners in being able to provide their service to customers, as well as the owners that live in the condo. An effective COVID-19 policy is also going to set out how your specific condominium will address the case of COVID when it is known to have arrived in your condominium, and how the owners are going to address the situations as well as the board. The policy needs to be shared with owners prior to COVID's arrival. This is so that our owners are going to understand that plans have been made. They're going to know what to do. They're going to know the information is available, and it will reduce the panic as well as bring community cooperation a little bit sooner. The policy should advise owners of different things. As some of the things that I would include in the policy are what steps will be taken in the case that COVID becomes known on site. How will owners be notified? How are we going to be notified when that person is out of quarantine or has, combated COVID? You also have to protect the privacy, though, of the unit owner going through that. It's important to realize, again, I can't stress enough, all types of condominiums need a policy, commercial included, workplace, townhomes, buildings, all of them need one, and it needs to be specific to each of their sites. There's not a one-size-fits-all policy, so I would not recommend a generic one. Once you're done developing your policy, it would be worth having a legal consult on it just to make sure that you're not infringing on any privacy issues, you are abiding by the laws, because the laws do constantly change as well. But the policy should also provide assurance to the owners that may get COVID, that the corporation is prepared to help that owner or that unit in any way possible, such as well-being check-ins if they'd like it, to make sure that they're doing okay, grocery pickups, prescriptions. This is only though if that unit owner consents to requiring help. And again, you have to make sure that you protect their privacy. Any unit impacted by COVID-19, let owners know that that information specific to the unit won't be divulged, unless the residents of that unit have given the permission to. But it lets the unit owners know going through COVID that they have help, their information is going to be kept private, and they're less likely to breach any potential quarantine as well. Outside of policies, there's other operational challenges that management and boards are experiencing. Right now, as we know, we can't attend meetings in person with the board. Online meetings or conference calls are how most companies have addressed this. But this is also dependent on the ability of those participating in the video conferencing. Do they have the right equipment? Some have older computers at home and their phones. Many have phones. Some people don't use the phones. I know one board member who has a flip phone. That's not going to work for video conferencing. Can you walk them through it? It's really difficult to train somebody how to use a video when you can't sit down with them to show them. So you might be on the phone trying to walk them through it. So what a good practice may we do is when you set up what method you're going to use, do a test run. Or maybe do it one-on-one with each person just to make sure, because they might be embarrassed to say they don't know. Change is frustrating for many people. Conference calls are a great other option. However, with conference calls, I find that a lot of information is lost. You don't necessarily hear cues or tones, comments get missed when everybody's talking over everybody. So it is a good alternative, but again, it has its downfalls as well. Owners' meetings is another challenge. However, with the new ruling from the government, we are approved to hold them electronically, which is going to help move some of them forward. Because you can vote electronically as well. We're all just starting the process of navigating through this as boards and owners as to the process and what you can and can't do. Some of that's going to have to be through legal navigation to make sure that we are meeting all the requirements. But I do encourage a lot of boards to move forward with owner meetings electronically. The issue is going to be once the restrictions are lifted later on, there is going to be a large influx of meetings. Managers may not be available because they're booking so many meetings. Your auditors may not be available. If you're having your engineers there for any presentations or legal counsel, sometimes they come and chair, they may not be available. So right now they can attend the meeting via electronic methods as well. And that's going to help reduce a lot of the influx later on, keeping that availability if anything else is needed. Definitely, if you've got an owner's request meeting, you should be proceeding with that as well. There are companies out there that do offer the service of hosting the owner's meeting for you. They will collect the proxies, they will collect your electronic ballots, and the cost, yes, there is a cost, but it is well worth it. One, you're going to reach quorum. Two, you probably have a facility booking anyway for a fee. You can just offset that cost towards the service. And again, it's going to alleviate much of your backlog later on down the road when all the other corporations are trying to book their meetings. And that's about it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gail. And thank you to all our speakers. We have a few minutes left for questions. What I'm going to do is, there's been a few good ones so far that have been answered in the chat thread, but for those of you who haven't been following chat, and for the sake of those who might watch this video after the fact, I'm going to put some of those questions back to the speakers. A really hot button question is for Justin, which was, Justin, do you have a screening kit, or were you talking about a screening protocol?
Yeah, it's a protocol. It's just a tool that we walk through every morning. And like we're on the third iteration of it now. But yeah, it's just designed to capture the pertinent questions of the day about how people are showing up. Are they safe to go to work?
Great. I think some people had the impression they heard you were screening and he's got the test. The next one was for Ryan. Ryan, have you noticed an uptick in borrowing interest since the COVID issues have come down?
Yeah, no, thanks. So I guess my answer is, and the question was more about as a percentage as well, you know, what percentage of corporations do you think are looking at financing? And I would say, you know, with respect to COVID in particular, the number is pretty small. Right now, it's going to be less than 10%. And I think that's because there really hasn't been a huge issue. Arrears haven't spiked. People are concerned about it. There's lots of inquiries coming in about using financing. And that's sort of on the operating side. The lending for major capital repairs, it's a different story. I don't know that the level of inquiry has been impacted by COVID because it's so short term. But I would certainly suggest that there are more and more corporations looking at major projects and using financing to fund those projects as an alternative to doing a special assessment where they don't necessarily have all the funding they need. I think the percentage of that is growing, certainly.
Great. And Kevin, have you experienced or witnessed changes in pricing and bidding practices from condo contractors?
Yeah, certainly from the perspective of having tenders come in and being submitted, we've switched over right at the start of this pandemic to all electronic submissions. So normally you'd want your bids to come in from your contractors. You want a hand-delivered bid in a package, signed and stamped, etc. Again, to avoid limit contact with everybody, then we've switched to an electronic format. With that, to maintain transparency, we're having the contractors submit those bids directly to the board by email or directly to the property manager by email. Then they are in control of the receipt of those bids, make sure they're received on time, etc. They can then forward them back to us after the closing time. We're happy to put together the summary and do the review and provide recommendations to them. But at least we're limiting that and having that be contactless, as they say.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. I'm looking at the clock and I'm looking at the chat screen, and the clock says 8 o'clock. The chat bar doesn't have any questions. So on behalf of our speakers and the CCI Golden Horseshoe Professional and Business Partners Committee, I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for taking the time to join us this evening. This is an ever-changing landscape and things will continue to evolve, but hopefully you've been able to take away at least a few tips or some food for thought on working with contractors in your community during this difficult time. I'd like to wish you a good night and stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.